Sometimes I just break down. You can't get a loom cube downtown. All right, so we are live from Peaks in the Past, and tonight's subject is Kingman Museum, which has a long and interesting history in Battle Creek. That it's one of those institutions that is always around, but you don't always know the background. Boy, we have all kinds of experts today. Joining me right now on the screen is Eltina DeYoung. She is the executive director of Kingman Museum. Say hi, Eltina.
Hello, everybody.
And then we have right above Eltina, at least on my screen, we have the irascible, the irreverent Kurt Thornton.
Hello.
Who knows a little bit about everything, right?
I just make it up.
He just makes it up. And then above him, we have Josh Holderbaum. And Josh, I don't know what your title is there at Kingman.
I'm the operations manager, so I do a little bit of everything that isn't covered under anyone else's job. And sometimes even that, too. So.
And then we have a board member already checking in, Annie Kelly. She says, hi, Elaine.
Eltina, probably.
Spell check, auto.
Check. Yes, it's auto spell. Yeah.
So hey, it's great to have you all, and we're going to jump right into. We have about 75 slides, and it's always fun to get through them all. But we'll start right off, and I just want to talk, and I'll throw it out there to everybody to talk a little bit about. I guess we should acknowledge right now that Kingman Museum is in a state of transition, and Eltina, why don't you talk a little bit about that first?
Yes, we are in a very definite state of transition. We've moved out of the Kingman Museum building that's located on Lila Arboretum's property, and the reason to do so was that we could not take care of the museum collections in the building. It was just too many issues with the building that we could not safeguard collections for the community. So we, with the help of Battle Creek Community Foundation and the Zanetti Foundation and also the Post Consumer Brands Foundation, we were able to move the collections into storage. So the collection is still in Battle Creek, but not in the museum anymore. And now we are really looking to see maybe a new location, maybe going back. Either way, we had to move out because the building really needs to be taken care of in order for us to take care of the collection.
Yeah.
So yes, so we are in a very definite state of transition right now.
Yeah. And the point we want to keep making tonight, and we're going to jump right into the slides here, is that, I mean, the story is still going, and there is a future, and the building is a piece of it, but there have been other buildings. The collection endures and the mission endures, and so we'll talk a lot about that. But we'll start right up here with the fellow that started it all, Edward Brigham Sr. And I think I got a couple of people who could talk a little bit about Mr. Brigham, but why don't you just jump right in? Josh, you researched all those bios, so.
Yeah. Trying to find at least some backstories on everybody involved with the museum was something I tried to do a few years ago. So Edward M. Brigham Sr. was our first director of the museum. He's originally from Otsego. He moved to Battle Creek around 1871, started out as a student at Battle Creek Public Schools at the high school, and at the time they had the museum room of Battle Creek Public Schools, and he, as a student, started volunteering with it. And at that point, the only real person who worked in the museum room was the custodian. And he doubled as essentially the curator and conservator of the artifacts. And so Brigham Sr. started working with it and cataloging things and identifying things. After he was done in high school, he went on to college at U of M. He went on expeditions both in the U.S. and around the world for various institutions. Some of which were funded by U of M or Albion College, some other colleges, even some for the Smithsonian. So he was bringing items back not only for those institutions, but also for the museum room of Battle Creek Public Schools. And so here we have an image of, that's Brigham Sr. seated on the far left. So he's the clean-shaven guy sitting there with his gun in front of him. In the middle of this is his In the middle of this is his ornithology professor at U of M, Joseph Beale Steer, and they were going on a ornithology trip to the Philippines. Hence the rifles and nice little baskets, probably for getting birds.
Yeah, for specimens, and that's how they did things back
Yep.
then. Kurt, you look like you're about to say something.
No, I was going to say, Johnson tells what ornithology is. Most people are going like, what? It's like birds. They were hunting birds, yeah.
Yeah, birds. And birds was a big thing for Brigham Senior. That's looking at our collection. That's, I don't want to say the majority of it, but it's a lot of it. We got a lot of birds.
And here, and I just want to say that it's extraordinary. I mean, this is a passion that began in high school, and really, is the roots of what this museum came from. And the idea of a high school creating a natural history museum, it was crazy back then, and certainly would be crazy today, right? I mean, you couldn't see a school doing that today.
Yep. Yeah, we're one of the first. Well, the Balkan Public Schools Museum Room was one of the first in the country.
Yep.
Like that. And after he was done in college, he returned to Balkan Public Schools, became a geology professor, and then eventually, when the museum became its own thing, he left to become the director of that. And in the meantime, he was working as he was a traveling lecturer. He would lecture on the expeditions he went on just to raise funds. He put himself through college by being a sewing machine repairman. And he also worked at the Kalamazoo Corset Company, which his dad worked at. And he holds patents in corset clasp designs.
Wow.
Yep.
Wow. A Renaissance man of the age.
There you go.
Yeah. Yeah.
He supported himself that way.
Yep.
That was a corset joke there.
Yeah.
These are good times to introduce a couple of audience comments. So you got a John Campbell saying, "Josh, he's the best."
Yeah. John was an intern with us a couple of years ago. Yep.
And then Ellie, Josh knows everything.
He does.
And Jill, he does. He's amazing. So
Yeah.
where are we now? Where are we on this?
So this is Brigham Senior in Mule Creek Caves in New Mexico. The Mule Creek Caves are volcanic caves down there. We know Brigham Senior brought back it was over 300 or so items from Mule Creek, most of which were Native American things he brought back. We have a lot of lava at the museum that we're really, really proud of. He didn't bring any lava back from Mule Creek, even though they're volcanic caves, because in 1919 he'd gone to Hawaii and he brought back, I don't even know how many pieces of lava and samples of that, but so we had our fit of lava from there, so we didn't need any from Mule Creek. But it's a really cool image, and I'd never seen what Mule Creek caves looked like until I saw this.
Huh.
So then this isn't the Temple of Doom?
No.
Oh, okay. All right.
Nope.
He doesn't have the right hat on. So, and here's an archaeological site.
Mm-hmm. And then back in the southwest with either Hopi or Zuni pottery, we have a lot of both that he purchased while he was out there. So we have a large collection of Southwest and American pottery. He was very big into that.
He was amazing. I mean, some of the stuff he collected back then, it's amazing stuff that he brought back for us.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you were speculating that this stuff that he's looking at in that photo wasn't necessarily what he brought back. That was pretty simple relative to what we have.
Yeah, most of the ones we have of that sort of pottery is finished and very intricately designed, and those aren't. So maybe he's looking at the process, or maybe those were ones that were finished later that he purchased. But I would assume he's just looking at the process of it. And here we see him in Mexico at a Teotihuacan with one of the feathered serpent heads.
Well, that's jumping ahead a little bit. I was just going to ask a question about the regions of the world that he went to. You mentioned Hawaii, but there's a lot from the Southwest and Mexico and South America, isn't there?
Yes. He was very keen on Southwest, so he went there several times. Mexico, Central America, South America, he went to a few times. The Philippines expedition he did go on for U of M. I'm not aware that we got anything from it. And then also Brazil was a big one. Marijo Island, just off the coast of the Atlantic, he brought back a whole lot of items from that, and we'll get to that later in the presentation. But
Yeah.
those were the main areas he went to.
This is more for Brigham Jr. I think. He got a camera, and this was the Battle Creek Centennial in 1931, and this is the Centennial Parade that he was taking pictures of. He actually took movies. He had a 60mm movie camera where he recorded the events because he was trying to save history for us folks in the future, which it has been transferred into a DVD format, so you can see the parade and the shots he took of our Centennial celebration. As I said, I have the camera that he took the films with. This is sort of fun, and it's not really related to Brigham. They had a steam engine go down the middle of the street on the streetcar tracks. As I was telling the funny thing about this was, as the train went through town, it had to stop at a railroad crossing and wait for a regular train to go by. So this train had to wait for a train. But it was a huge celebration, as you can see, and Brigham was involved in this, making the Centennial celebration a big deal. This was very important.
Yeah, I was going to mention that as well. I mean, this isn't necessarily about the museum, but they were very involved in the planning of the Centennial celebration.
Yes, They thought it was very important, especially the Pioneer Village, where they were trying to reenact how the settlers were here and the Native Americans, some of the things they did. They were trying to reenact that for people. Let's see, Andy wants to know where this is downtown. This is on the corner of McCamley Street and Michigan Avenue looking east. The building on the left is the J.C. Penney store, is now going to be the brewery, is it New Holland Brewery?
Yeah.
That's on the left-hand side there in this picture.
Okay. And then this is the memorial to him. It's on the grounds there at Lila Arboretum near the museum.
Yep, right on the path towards the front door. And this rock is actually the plaque is mounted on a rock from Brigham's household here in Battle Creek.
That was really cool. I did not know that until Josh told me that. That's very cool.
And I'm not sure if you know, Kurt, where that house was.
Nope.
Okay, I'm not sure where he lived.
Nope.
We just know he worked at the museum.
Getting lots of comments, and folks, I'll try to get them in as I can, but
Okay.
I don't want to hit the wrong button. But and then you mentioned Edward M. Brigham Jr. already. He filmed the Centennial, so I probably should have had that slide a little bit lower. But
Yep. Next time when we do this again, we'll have to change this. But
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I was telling the folks here that probably I'm the only one in this group that actually knew of Mr. Brigham Jr. because when I was a child, we go to the museum and he would take us around and show us the collection, and like Josh said, the birds. He was really and here he is showing high school or elementary school kids some of the displays. But he obviously loved what he was doing. He was really deeply involved in the collection. He was really he had a passion for it, and he tried to share it with us kids. And when you're an elementary school kid, it's mostly you're just thinking it's really cool to see all these birds. With them, oh, this is really cool. He's got all these birds, but he was really devoted to education and to the museum and sharing this with us kids.
Yep. And what's funny about Brigham Jr. too, being the son of Edward Brigham Sr.
Mm-hmm.
And our second director of the museum, he took over in 1943. Is Brigham Jr. actually didn't want to go into the sciences.
Oh, really?
Okay. Originally in theater and debate, and he was going to be more. He wanted to go more into like a stage kind of thing, but eventually he did circle back to, kind of the inevitable sciences and museum work, and then ended up taking over the museum. And I think that's part of what everyone remembers is if folks come to the museum and they say, "Oh yeah, we remember Mr. Brigham."
Mm-hmm.
They meet Mr. Brigham Jr., but he did a lot of speeches and lecturing too, so he was certainly well suited for that to convey that information that he knew.
Here he is in Mexico, 1952.
Yep. Brigham Jr. didn't go on as many trips as his dad did, but he did go on one pretty big trip to Mexico and brought back a lot of artifacts that he was able to get down there. But he was not as well traveled as his dad was.
Okay.
But by that time, the museum was already it was established and had a wonderful collection at that point. So just curating it had to be a full-time job, as you know.
Yep.
There was a question from one of our viewers. Was he Adventist? That's not something we've talked about, but I'm not aware of it.
I don't believe so.
Yeah, I've not heard anything to confirm or deny. I can't really say.
Yeah. All right. And there he is with his wife.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's his wife Elmina. And then all three generations of the Brigham family. That's in the very foreground. That's Edward Brigham III, who was the first Edward Brigham to not become director of Kingman Museum. And he still ended up with kind of the sciences. He ended up working with the Audubon Society, and currently has a wildlife sanctuary in his name in South Dakota.
Oh wow! Okay.
Which is named after him. Yep.
Huh. These are great pictures, Josh. You got from the collection. These are great.
Yeah.
I really like it. For me, being at the museum only for like 2.5 years, I always recognize Senior by the way he's always having his hands on his hips, and so that's Senior, and that's really obvious in the previous photo.
Yeah, this picture is in 2009 when they had the Brigham family come back for a display on Where in the World is Ed Brigham, and they had this is all of his descendants or descendants-in-laws came back for the exhibit, and they were really pleased with the display and recognizing him.
Yeah, it is a neat photo.
Yep.
And so this is the part of the program where we answer the question some people might have is why it's called Kingman Museum, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep. So we get our name from Albert C. Kingman, who was a state senator, and he also was involved. He was a shareholder at the Nichols and Shepard Threshing Company, and so he's the namesake. He wasn't involved because he was dead before the museum was built. So essentially, when the idea for a museum building of its own was in the works, they essentially kind of had the money to build a museum, but they didn't have enough, so they reached out to his Kingman's wife and his daughter for the naming rights to at least get the money for that. So we have it in his name. According to them, from newspaper articles at the time, he was a big huntsman and he was a big outdoorsman, so it goes along with that.
Sure.
But he was not directly involved. He never saw it. Hopefully he would have enjoyed it, but yes, that's why we are. And if you look at the building today, it does say Kingman Memorial Museum. That's why it's more, even though we've never called ourselves that.
This is the Kingman building downtown in Battle Creek. This is on Michigan Avenue. It's still there, but this was he built this building, and it now has Rice's Shoe Shop is in it now. We have a picture of it. I think of it more current one where part of it's covered up. Yeah, this is how it looks now. Half of it's covered up with what we used to call metal cancer from the 1960s and 70s. But the building is still there, and it's got beautiful brickwork on it. It's still a really beautiful building.
Ever since you showed me this picture, Kurt, every time I go by there, I'm like, take that facade off.
Oh yeah, the brickwork is just even now after they've taken a whole bunch of the facade off of it, still the brickwork is just beautiful. It's a really pretty building.
Yeah. So, but we didn't have. So, we're going to talk a little bit about all the places that all these artifacts, all the collection came from, and I just love this photo.
This is great.
Yeah.
Battle Creek Public Schools, 1928 expedition. I mean, geez, how many schools put out something like that, right?
Yeah.
Not many. Not many.
Yeah.
Now, my stuff, it says that was the first museum owned by a public school in the United States, is what my stuff says, but I don't know how accurate that is. But
so I'm sorry, Kurt. Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
So what I think is so interesting from, like the late 1800s, early 1900s, there was a real urge to bring the world down back to your own community. So, and especially museums were really collecting, and Senior was really collecting for really for himself and his interests, but he was also collecting for the Field Museum, for the American Museum of Natural History in New York, and also for the University of Michigan. And eventually, he donated, and Josh, you can add and correct where needed, his part of his collection to Kingman Museum. And so what we have in our Kingman Museum collection are phenomenal pieces that are of similar standing, so to speak, as those renowned museums in the United States. And what we were really hoping to do now, because bringing the world to Battle Creek and educate the community with those objects about the world, about the natural history and all these different cultures in the world, that's something that we are still doing, and that's why we exist, and it's why we have the collection. And so what I also would like, and Josh and Emily, who will be popping in later, is we really want to try to show Battle Creek what we have in the collection and how phenomenal the pieces are that we have. And so by relocating or trying to find a better location or updated location, we hope to accomplish that for the community. And this is just a phenomenal photo that travel and curiosity and inspiration. I love this photo.
Yeah, me too. And so, Josh, you gathered these photos for us, right?
Yeah, we do. We have some images from Brigham Senior's trips, and I do want to give props to KCC because they helped us digitize some of our archives. We have a massive photographic archive of which most of it is not digitized, or in some cases even identified. But they were able to come in and digitize at least a few of these from there. And we were able to pick out a few that we know Brigham Senior went to. So here we have the nunnery quadrangle at Uxmal in Mexico. Oh god, Mexico. Yeah, I was about to say Guatemala. No, that's Carigua. This is Mexico.
Is he in the doorway?
I don't think so. We had a larger version of this up, and it didn't look like him.
No.
But he might have been behind the camera, I would assume.
Yeah.
For these, and then another one of his at the Temple of the Warriors at Chichen Itza in Mexico, and then more of the adobe huts. What I'd really kill to find, which I'm not sure we probably have it somewhere, but they might not be digitized. I'd love to see images from Hawaii when he brought stuff back in 1919, but if we have it, they haven't been digitized yet. Then in Guatemala again. He kind of worked his way down that way and then into Brazil as well, but not too much farther south than Brazil into South America.
And I don't know if people appreciated that this was really a big deal to be able to do this. This isn't like now where you can take a plane and just go to these places.
Right.
You had to, this was a lot of work and a challenge to go to these places. He really took a lot of effort to do this kind of stuff.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, I'm even thinking when we saw the photo of I don't know what kind of car it was in the Southwest. I mean, that's not a pleasant ride.
No,
Yep.
no.
Yeah.
The road, they didn't have super highways back then. You were going on back roads, and
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, we have his journal when he went to Marijo Island, and that journal is on a boat, like every day. He's on a boat going somewhere. Yeah, and then more of Brigham Jr. in Mexico in the 50s, 1952.
Yeah.
That one's in Acapulco, and I think that's Brigham Jr. to the left of the swordfish on the left. I think. I can't really tell, but he
with a
looks like
camera and a hat.
I think so.
Okay.
It looks like his hat, but I can't really tell. But it looks like a similar shirt to what he was wearing in the other ones.
Yep.
I just hate not sharing all these comments with everybody. There's so many, but Annie points out that the photo, the guy didn't have his hands on his hips. So,
That's the
That
son.
was
This is
the
the son.
junior. Yeah.
and Jill, who is a constant booster of all things Battle Creek, wants to point out that BCPS is still doing great experiential learning, and we certainly want to give props there. And Annie Peterson is really wanting to hear more about the building. And I mentioned before that Bill White said Brigham lived on Verona Road.
Mhm.
So
Okay.
Good to
just
know. I'm
keep-
making a
keep
note of
going.
that.
And then Annie has a suggestion, maybe check the Bishop Museum in Oahu for photos of his trip to Hawaii. So
Yeah, that's a good idea. And I know Brigham Senior was actually friends with the director there, whose last name, ironically, was Brigham, but was not related to him. But they were there at the same time.
yeah. I mean, it bears mentioning, you mentioned it already, but his stature he was well
Mhm.
renowned
Oh, yeah.
around in his field.
And published. He published at least one scientific journal on a bird from Brazil called the Watson, of which we have a copy in our collection that is translated into French. So he was international.
So let's talk a little bit about a school museum. And I just love this quote. It's intended to make this new museum a strictly natural history museum and not devoted to freaks and littered with all sorts of knickknacks. I mean, this was, high purpose. I mean, they really believed in what they were doing. And I just love this shot of the old #1 school. Just a beautiful shot. And
It is located where the music building is at the high school now. This would be facing McCamley Street. And you can see the high school in the background on the left and right hand side. I like the fire escape on the right hand side. I was trying to figure out how that worked, but
that's a fire escape, huh?
yep.
Huh.
I don't know if it was a slide or what. You climbed down a ladder, but I'm guessing it was a slide.
Yeah. Huh. So you can see that the museum was built right into the planning of the building there.
What's interesting about these pictures is because I had to process these for the library back in the 1970s because they had glass negatives and I was one of the people that could print them. They made these to go to the Centennial exhibition in Philadelphia in 1876 because the school was built in 1871. And they sent this series of pictures that we have of the high school, and these diagrams of the building all went to a display to the Centennial exhibition in Philadelphia. This was what we sent them.
Huh. Wow.
Because most people don't have drawings like these of cross sections of their buildings. You're going like, why'd they do that here? And it was because they were doing this for the Centennial exhibition.
Wow. Very neat.
Uh-huh.
And I just had to include one photo of a classroom because those ceilings are so high.
Mm-hmm.
And Kurt, you say that's because they didn't
Air circulation, because they didn't have the powerful fans we do now. But to have that many people in a room, you had to have the air circulate well enough. You had the room that large. That made it easier for them to do that.
Can't imagine what that did for the noise. That would even worse.
Kids were well behaved back then. They didn't talk or anything during school. It was really quiet. Huh?
So, and there we have everybody covets the displays.
The cabinets.
Display
Oh, yeah, this is
cabinets.
the museum. This is the museum on the 3rd floor of the high school.
Yep, we had this image up in the museum, and we got more comments on if we still had those cases. I think all of our staff would give our right arms to have those
Displays
cases.
like this. Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they are beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
And no, I don't have them in my attic. That's people. Do you have those? No, I don't have them. No, I really don't have them.
Yeah, I accused Kurt of that last planning
If
session.
my mom could have gotten them, we would have them. But no, we don't.
Some more of the inside.
Mm-hmm.
Probably
And then-
like museum equipment in that last shot, maybe.
And then they moved to the Fine Arts Building, which was on Van Buren Street. It's down where it's down at St. Phil and their property. This was the Fine Arts Building. They taught art and music there, and they housed the museum there for a while. The building was there up until about 10 or 15 years ago. It used to be St. Phil's cafeteria, and they just tore this down like 15 years ago.
Yep. But then the nameplate for the building is still leaning up against St. Phil building now.
Yep.
So if you're ever driving down Van Buren, you can still look over and spot that.
Uh-huh.
And why did the museum move out of the school?
They needed room.
Yeah.
That was when the schools were burgeoning full of kids, and they had to keep moving stuff out. I thought it was housed in Willard Library for a little while, but I couldn't remember if that's... I thought it was in Willard for a little while when they built the new Willard Library in 1905. I thought it was housed in there.
I think we have some records that say that, but I don't know how much of our collection was there.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, I think I've heard that too.
Yeah. Well, Mac, you must know. Isn't it down there somewhere? Don't you have like some pieces of that? Maybe you have those display cases.
Maybe I do. All right. So now we're gonna do some fancy footwork here, and we're going to add architect Randy Case to the stream.
There he is. Oh, Randy.
Hello there.
And we're going to
Randy will wear his hat. I'm wearing my hat then.
Yeah.
temporarily take Josh out, but Josh will be back because, as has been well established, he knows everything.
Yes, he does.
Kurt has his Indiana Jones hat on, and I have my Brigham Senior hat.
Altina, you need a hat.
I know. I'm looking around, but I don't have one in view here. But
So this is.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. I didn't mean to talk over you, Tina. That's the trouble when you get all these people on here. It's easy to do.
This shows you Lila Arboretum, and prior to it being Lila Arboretum, it was the Battle Creek Country Club. This used to be a golf course before they moved out to the side of Gogwak Lake, and then Lila Post bought it and wanted it to be an arboretum for our community. She wanted to. I think they were going to plan to have every tree species native to North America was going to be in this arboretum, but the depression came and it never got finished. But
Right.
In this picture, you can see the museum in the upper, very center of the picture. You can see the little white spot up there, and that is the Kingman Museum up there.
Yeah, I'm going to go back because I want to bring Randy in and talk a little bit about the planning for the building. But the whole plan for Lila Arboretum was just amazing. This idea of a campus for as a home for all these, cultural institutions. Woulda, coulda, shoulda.
Yeah.
And that was the plan. They were going to have a musical. Weren't they going to have a musical venue, and they were going to have art facility there, and I thought they were going to have an art museum. And
Well, for the while too, during the Centennial, we built a log cabin on the site, and it was going to be Pioneer Village out there for a while. And it did serve that purpose for a number of years.
Mm-hmm.
And then the cabin that was built was moved to the Adventist Historic Village.
Yeah.
And so was the school and the barn that was all part of the Pioneer Village too. That was all there also.
Right. It was interesting because this was owned by the school. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. Well, the interesting thing about it is they commissioned A.B. Chanel to design the building, and he's one of Battle Creek's foremost architects at the time. He had designed St. Phil's Catholic Church, Presbyterian Church, a number of buildings up in Merritt's Woods.
Mm-hmm.
And so he was kind of the local famous architect. And it was interesting because it was a fairly austere building. I suspect that they were trying to be frugal with capital. It was built out of durable materials and so forth, but it wasn't a huge building for a museum. And so it went through a number of iterations of trying to get more useful square footage by moving the mezzanines and various things around a little bit. And then a little later they affected ADA and a lot of these accessibility issues.
Sure.
And of course, as everything, maintenance needs to be done. And the school system owned it for quite a period of time, and then the city owned it for quite a period of time, and the maintenance in the the long term of it, the maintenance just wasn't done.
Yeah.
But we can talk about that a little bit later when we get into
Sure.
more slides.
But
it-
yeah, a frugal building, but $50,000 was not a cheap building in at that
no,
time.
it was made with very durable materials, and it had balustrades around the top that were all turned limestone, and it was. But in terms of the kind of buildings that A.B. Chanel was doing, this is a fairly austere building for that kind of thing. But museums, the important thing of the museums is what's inside as opposed to what's outside. So
Yeah.
Right.
that's another thing you need to make sure. You don't want to oversell the exterior when you can put money into the exhibits and the other things that are important to the community and telling the story.
Yeah.
And you can see it was kind of all by itself out there and kind of marooned in the middle of nowhere. You can see it
This
up on
is-
the hill on the right there.
Trees were just starting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just being planted. It was basically open fields.
Mm-hmm.
And that was what was beautiful about the arboretum aspect, that the specimen trees and all these kinds of things were introduced, and it gradually grew up, and it kind of the building felt part of it then after it developed.
Yeah.
It was designed by the same gentleman that designed Irving Park. Was it Clifton? I'm bad at the names. Edward Clifton or something like that, because he designed both the Arboretum and Irving Park.
Yeah, I don't know.
I love this one.
I love
Yeah.
this photo.
Yeah, that was interesting.
I'm getting a little lag time on my slideshow. I'm sorry, folks, but yeah, this is moving in, right?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
This is the backside facing Limit Street, and you can see the arched windows and the detail there to let light into the museum. And there's a balcony on the back, and it was quite interesting from the back.
And to me, this shows you how small the building is when you see Mr. Brigham standing there. I mean, it's a nice sized building, but it deceives you in how large it is when you see someone actually standing next to it. It's like, oh, it's not as big of a building as I thought it was.
Well, yeah. Well, you see the size of the truck and the delivery. It's almost half the square footage of the building on the first floor. Not quite that big, but in the picture you can kind of tell.
And we were looking at it last week. We were trying to figure out how many of these specimens are still there, and some of them are in storage, and some of them are gone. But and of course, they're also at this point almost 100 years old now. So that's
Well, maybe something to mention, actually, just to drop this, is that 2021 is actually the 150th anniversary of the collection. So it started within the public schools, and now we still have the collection available for the community. But this is 150 years of Kingman collection, the Natural History and World Culture collection. So it's quite old. It's quite extensive. Yep.
And I don't have those lamps either. The lamps are gone now, but I do not have those lamps either. Back. It's like those are gone. But.
Yeah.
And they were gone by the time this photo was taken, too.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting to note also that underneath that top stairway, that is a storage area.
Oh, okay.
It was built, it's a large platform. It's a fairly good sized storage space.
And there's the car that everyone really likes.
Yeah.
Mercedes.
So maybe something to mention, that with the building, it was not an easy decision to move out of the building,
Sure.
especially because it is built for the collection. It has quite some nostalgia for the people of Battle Creek in its region. A lot of memories, a lot of quality time with family and friends. The building was just, what I mentioned before, it was not a good place for the collection because of climate control and water penetration. But also the building was built, in early 1930s, where the funding structure of museum work, and especially because they were still part of the Battle Creek Public Schools, the funding structure for a museum was quite different than what we would really need for museum operations to have now. Like we need to have education programs. We would want to have events. We would need to have space to accommodate all these people coming in, and that is something that the building could not provide for us. And so we could not accommodate the whole grade level to come to the museum, and that's why we would join with Lila Arboretum's education department to provide those programs for whole grade levels to come in. And maybe Emily can talk a little bit about it. She's our education and outreach manager. So really, to make a decision to move the collection out was quite hard for us to make. But we were saying the collection defines Kingman Museum and not specifically the location, because this is like maybe the third location already for the collection. So, but Battle Creek is the place for the collection. So we'll figure it out at some point.
Well, it was interesting also because additions were done out underneath, beyond the building walls, and a lot of them were built of concrete. And at the time that they were built, everyone thought that concrete is impermeable, but really it's not.
It's not.
Water can get into the concrete and cause fissures and cracks and things like that. And so there was a lot of areas that were rough, and it was you can't have the collection with that kind of moisture and so forth in, and it was substantial to.
Because this picture shows we've taken out the windows, recovered the windows on the back, and put the elevator in to have handicapped accessibility. And they built this in probably the 1960s or 70s.
I think it was 1974.
Okay.
Yeah, it was done for that specific reason.
All right, to make it accessible. Yeah.
And it was easiest to do it there because the openings were already there. They didn't build a lot of steel structure and so forth. And unfortunately, it took a lot of the charm of the building and a lot of the natural light. But for museums at that time, natural light is something they weren't looking for because of ultraviolet degradation and so forth of art.
Sure.
So this was kind of the state of the art at that time, and
it did what it needed to do. That was what you needed to have it do. So that covered it. Yep.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, and Randy, just it's always a challenge to find buildings this old, to find it's not inexpensive.
No.
And they're beautiful, but it's hard to apply them to modern needs, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Well, it can be. When you look at things in a long-term and embodied energy and carbon footprint approach, an existing building is sustainable because the embodied energy is already there. Yeah. Whereas if you tear it down, you throw all out into a landfill and then you start all over again. But it is difficult and it's costly.
Mm-hmm.
And
there's a problem. Money.
That's the issue. Is it can be. It usually isn't the same cost as building a new building, but you have to overcome a lot of things. And sometimes if the demolition costs of the interior materials starts approaching the cost of the shell of a new building, then of course you have to do this whole feasibility and look back and forth what makes the most sense for what you've got. If you have the capital, then obviously it's a no-brainer. You could go ahead and we could do an addition to the Kingman, but based on what they needed to do, there was a lot of things that needed to be repaired, mechanical systems and all those kind of things. The useful lifespan of all the equipment and so forth was way past their typical life.
Well, I'm still buying my lottery tickets so I can see if I can help pay for that. So don't worry, give me a winner and we'll fix this problem. So.
And I had to keep Randy on for this section because he's pictured it here. Let's see if anybody can pick it out.
Yeah, I took this picture in I believe it would have been 1980 when we were planning the Centennial for 1981. Probably. This is in the basement of the Kingman Museum. And we all got together to plan the city's 150th birthday party. And Randy's in the top picture there he's the distinguished gentleman with the beard there in that picture. My mother's in that picture. Josh's mom is behind my mom. Linda Holderbaum is behind my mother on the left there. And Bobby Wilson is in the bottom picture on the right-hand side. She ended up being the director of the Centennial. And Erwin Brucker is there. He owned the Merritt House. He's to Bobby's left. And then oh Lord, the gentleman, he was the president of the Historic Society, was on the far left in those pictures. But yeah, we were planning history there.
Yeah. Little comment from Joe.
Little did
Maybe
we
not.
realize, Randy, we were going to be history. See, we are now history.
Yeah. We're historical.
Oh, we are. That's why I was always behind the camera, so you don't get to see pictures of me.
Yeah.
Randy, I just wanted to mention that you've been quite an advocate for preservation of buildings for a long time, and
He has done a great job. He has been great in trying to
Terrific.
save our history and our architecture.
Well,
Yeah.
thanks. We were able to save quite a few of them, but
You have,
a
yep.
lot of them.
Your efforts have been really, you can see it in our community, the things you've done. It's
Well,
really
we-
important.
when we work with clients, we always try to see if there is a building that's available first before we start something new.
Yeah.
That's why we haven't got a lot of new buildings that I've done, because we've been trying to save things.
Once again, you've done a great job. This is the Sesquicentennial celebration out in front of the Kingman Museum. We had a Pioneer Village Festival over the weekend of Memorial Day in 1981. And I would guess maybe thousands of people came out there to see this. We had, this is a reenactment of a musket firing, a flintlock, I think. He was showing us how he could fire that gun. And that was pretty amazing. It was a great time. The weather was nice, and lots of people came up to see history.
It was interesting to see how much effort it took to fire a shot. And you could
Yes.
you miss the first time.
Come on, in the movies,
Well,
it's really easy. You just see them grab the gun and they shoot it. How much work it took. It's like, yeah. This is Bob Lerner at the he was the director of the museum at the time, and we're guessing he's drinking coffee. I'm guessing. I don't know. It's like but
He
yeah,
said he said he'd chime in tonight, so I don't know. Maybe we can ask him.
but yeah, that's Bob. He's just sitting there enjoying the event after all the work he did on it. He was just sitting there enjoying it.
well, Bob was. How long was LTN? How long was Bob the director?
Well, that's Josh and Emily would know much better than I,
Okay.
but I think it was maybe like 30 years, or how long was he? I think something like that. From 1971 until what? What was it? We talked
Come on,
about it.
Emily,
the
make
other day.
something up. Emily, you're on screen. Make
Oh, was
something
I supposed to write that down?
up. Make it up. Make it up.
Hey, Randy,
Okay,
thanks for
Josh,
coming on.
Yeah,
Well, that last picture,
Hi.
wanted to talk about the
71 to
last picture just to
97.
do it.
You want to back it up one? Can you back up the pictures there?
Sure, I can. Sometimes it advances 2 to my 1 click, so I apologize for that.
Yeah,
It's not user error.
Yeah. Well, the fun thing about this was the first annual Pioneer Village Fiddle Festival.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, there we
And I
so
know
here
that I went all over the state of Michigan, going to fiddle festivals and concert to find people to come to the Sesquicentennial to play in our contest. And we wanted to have a fiddle contest. I'm not sure whose idea it was, but I ended up doing it. So we had quite a few people from all over the state show up for this. And it was really a fun event, and it went on. We did the Pioneer Village Festival for a number of years after the
Yes, it did.
Centennial. And the
Very cool.
fiddle contest was always kind of a fun thing to see who was to show up and what they would play and how the judges looked at things. Some of them were real purists. You had to play, a jig, a reel, and such in a certain order. And then you had some free spirits that came up there and would play all like jazz fiddle and so forth. And it was beautiful stuff. But of course, they just said, "Oh, that's just terrible." It was funny how it developed, and it was just a fun event.
Yes, it was. Yep, that was a fun time.
Got a comment from a viewer about that, remembering it.
I don't know if it was mentioned, but Bob Lerner was from 1971 to 1997, so it's 26 years
That's
director of the
right.
Kingman Museum.
That's right.
This
Hey,
is
Randy,
the,
thanks for coming on. I'm going to pull in Josh here because I think he probably had answers to some of these questions. So, but thanks a lot for coming on.
Thank
Sure.
you, Randy.
Happy to.
This picture shows the Pioneer Village cabin they built. This came down somewhere near Athens. This was an actual cabin that they moved up to the site behind Kingman. And if you saw it, because I went down and looked at it before they disassembled it, it looked like a regular house. It had clapboard wood on it, and we had to go up and look in a closet to find out that it actually had logs built into the walls. And they moved this. I think the Army Corps of Engineers helped us do this, and to disassemble it and bring it all back and put it all together here was quite a chore. And now it's part of the Seventh-day Adventist village. They moved it over there, and they're preserving it and using it as part of their educational stuff there now. It's really nicely preserved.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, they also ended up having a schoolhouse here that was from Lakeview. Because my sister was director of the Historic Society then, and they moved a schoolhouse and a barn that was all on the property. And that's all been moved to the Seventh-day Adventist village now.
Wow. That'd actually be a good subject for a show some evening.
I bet that would be. The Adventist village would be very interesting.
Here we go. Finally, there is a real delay on my. So we're going to get into some of what's inside the building, and it's just so cool to see this. And there you are. See,
Yep.
Just have faith; it works.
There's my clam that's in the far end of the right-hand picture. I was telling them when I was a kid and we used to come there, they told a story about the man-killing clam. And as I was telling Altina, I don't know if that's true, and Josh wasn't sure about this either, but we were told that clam there in the right-hand picture in the center, it killed a man, but when you're a kid, you think it ate the guy, but what happened is he was diving and got his either hand or foot stuck in it, and then drowned. But once again, when you're a kid, that's exciting stuff. That's the stuff I remember. It's like,
yep, yeah. We think that's still the same giant clam we have, and I doubt it would eat someone, but it is heavy enough to kill someone.
yeah.
So,
But if they got their hand or foot stuck in it, yep, that would be it. Huh?
yeah.
But this is even showing that by the time I went here in the 50s and 60s, it had so much more collection in there, which we're going to see in a few more pictures. But as Altina was saying, the display cases look really nice. It'd be nice to have some of those display cases.
Yep. And just to point out too, the saber-toothed cat and the dire wolf, you can see on the right side of the photo on the right, and then also a little bit on the other side of the photo.
Yeah.
But they're roughly right where they were in the museum for years, right up against the stairs there. So they never moved very far from that spot.
Huh.
But this was probably taken in the 1930s, I would imagine. This would be pictures from the 1930s.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember the museum science mobile. I used to go around to the different elementary schools, and we could go in and see different displays in the science mobile. That was really cool. Of course, we were excited because it came to our school. We just thought that was just really cool.
Now it's my car. We still go to all the schools. It's just now in my SUV. Not nearly as cool as this.
Yeah. Well, I've seen your SUV. It's still pretty cool, Emily. It's still pretty cool. Now, this is how I remember it. When you go in and you could barely walk around in the museum because there was so much stuff. In the center, there was a collection of minerals where you could go in. They had black lights, and the minerals would glow. And we would go in there and look at our arms because we could see the dust on our arms. That was, once again, we were more excited by that kind of stuff. But it's still, the collection was incredible because there was something. Every corner you turned in that place, there was something to see, and it was just quite. When you're a kid, it was just really exciting. This was really exciting.
How often did you go in, Kurt?
It seems to me like we went once a year, but I'm not really sure if that's what they did or not. It's like I think we were in 3rd or 4th grade we went, but because Mom used to take us out there. So I don't know if this is an appropriate place to tell the story about my mom and the babies,
sure.
The glass babies, the fetuses in the glass jars, which people are always fascinated by. But the story my mom told is in 1947 when she was pregnant for my oldest sister. Mom was having difficulty with her pregnancy, and the doctor was worried. And back then, her family was telling her that she should have a miscarriage, that she should try to get rid of the child because Mom was going to have health issues. So they told her to do things to jump up and down, and they told her, well, there was no child developed. There was nothing there. And back in 1947, you didn't have the internet. You couldn't look this kind of stuff up. You couldn't even probably go to the library and easily look up information about pregnancies and stuff. So Mom went out to Kingman Museum and went to look to see how far her fetus had developed, and realized that it was actually a viable child, and so Mom did not do those things. So I have my oldest sister, Diane, and to thank the Kingman Museum display for that, because that was what made Mom realize she should keep the child. It was but again, the educational part of the museum came through to just a person in the public. It came through. That was great.
Yep.
There's a lot of memories that people have about visiting. So just more displays here.
And this is speaking. Can you hear me?
Yes.
You can hear me? That also speaks to what Eltina was talking about earlier in the evolution of a museum space, where at one point you had like the cabinet of curiosities, right? Mm-hmm. And you might be able to bring through a tour, perhaps, of a school group. But now we want more of classroom spaces and hands-on exhibits, which is so hard to do. It's hard to bring in maybe 4 or 5 classrooms, like a whole third grade, for example, in that kind of a location.
Yeah, because they used to have the auditorium down in the basement, and that's where Mr. Brigham would bring us and talk to us about the museum. Then they'd let us loose in the building. And this picture here is from the Susby Centennial, and they were doing movies in there. I can't remember what they were showing. It was surprisingly, it was natural history stuff. And the people would stop in there, and this shows the auditorium in the basement of the Kingman Museum back in 1981.
Yeah.
This was such a phenomenal program. If I could just jump in for a second to talk about you, I think it just showed a picture of the Passport to Discovery series. This is also something that everybody remembers. Once called the Wildlife Film Series. We just celebrated 75th anniversary last year. So continuous program for 75 years in Battle Creek is pretty special. You can see here in this picture, it's one of the Kingman Museum newsletters that we used to put out. This one from 1959, showing what the next series of wildlife films were going to be. Many of them made and filmed by the Brighams. And so if you look at this picture, I took this picture as we were moving the collection out of the building. We still have a lot of those films in canisters. As you can see here, it says 1955 Northwest Adventures. When the museum did fall off the school budget in the late 90s, around 2000, this program was also slated to discontinue. But the Kiwanis Club of Battle Creek picked it up for us, and they've been continuing the series, which is called the Passport to Discovery film series. So this is still happening. It only stopped because of the pandemic this last year. And Kingman Museum actually started a few years ago, jumped back on board, and they now co-host it together, still showing travel films. It's pretty exciting.
It is exciting. And here we just have a couple of staffers or maybe volunteers, I don't know, just sorting through. What a job. I mean, it's amazing what was kept there.
Yep. And that's before, this picture is before we had actual collection rooms built. Usually when we would do collection room tours for the public, which wasn't very common, but when we did, and I led them, usually I would tell a group, okay, we're going to go to this collection room here, and we're going to go to this collection room here, and they'd stare at me blankly like, there's no way there can be a room there. There's no way you can store anything there. And then opening a door and be like, oh, wow, we have all this. So all of that storage was under some of these cases here, which is really wild. And that's just a sample of how many birds we have here. I'm sure we still have the vast majority of those.
What's that room in the middle there, Kurt?
I thought that was the room where we had the black light and the minerals, was where we would go in and look at the minerals under black light. Was what that room in the center was. That's
Also
Bob Lerner on the right-hand side there, setting up a display.
Yep. And on the left is Tom Johnson, who is one of our exhibit builders and curators for a long time.
He was there, yes. He was really helpful in the Susby Centennial when we were there. He helped us with lots of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And Kurt, we do still do that black light display during the Spooky Science Saturday event. We partner with the Kalamazoo Geology group in Kalamazoo, and they bring in their black lights. And that's when we have to turn the planetarium into a different space.
So I'll have to come in and look, see the dust on my arms again. That's really cool when you can see that.
Speaking of the planetarium,
There we are.
you can see one of our fantastic volunteers, Sharon. She's a retired science teacher here in Battle Creek, teaching one of our after school and summer programs. We still actually do quite a bit with Battle Creek Public Schools. We partner pretty closely with their 21st century learning programs, after school, summer students. And so you can see here one of those programs. We've got some pretty dedicated students, volunteers, interns. It's a fabulous way to connect with our students here.
Yeah.
I want to say the museum still, I mean, for having taken out all those tons of stuff in there, it's still an incredible collection. When you go in, you guys do a really great job displaying things in a way that you have room, you can go look at things and read about things. You still do a really great job educating us in the
It all comes down to really good partnerships.
Yep.
We've got a really strong connection with NASA, with NOAA, with the National Informal STEM Education Network. Josh and I are constantly doing workshops and programs and going on our own field trips, trying to keep a lot of this going.
Well,
It's
Emily,
been a
a
lot
lot
of
of that
fun.
is just like it's you folks that are doing it. I mean, you love it, and it obviously shows. So your devotion to it is what makes it work. Altina, Emily, Josh, you guys, and whoever else is there, you do a really wonderful job getting people excited, and it obviously shows you love it.
Yeah.
So that's what's great. It does show people. It's catching. We like that. It's great.
It all really comes back to that picture of Brigham Jr., right, where he's surrounded by the students with all the
Yep.
birds in the background. I keep that picture up for my own motivation. Like, how do we maintain this legacy? How do we maintain this mission, right, to build enthusiasm for the natural world, the earth and space sciences
Yep.
and world cultures? It's quite the legacy to maintain, and we do take that very seriously.
And you do a great job.
So I think it's interesting too, though, because we're talking about inspiring and providing enjoyment for the public. But like what you see here with, and maybe Josh can tell about this, what's happening in this slide and this slide, in the previous slide, is that we were learning from a PhD student from Brazil about some of our objects, and we were super excited. I was super excited to find out so much more about some of our pieces in the collection. So maybe Josh, is something you or Emily to jump in and tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so this is this in the preceding slide are of the items Brigham Sr. brought back from Marajo Island in Brazil. Marajo Island was the home of the Marajoara culture. They were people who died out in the 1400s. They buried a lot of their artifacts in the soil of Marajo, and that soil is such that things just work their way back up to the surface. So when Brigham Sr. visited there in 1881, he brought back a whole ton of pottery. We have over 800 pieces, some of which are full pots, some of which are just teeny tiny little fragments. But we have a whole lot of that here. And then just before the pandemic started, last January, we had Lucas Monteiro de Araujo, who is from Brazil. He's a PhD student at the University of Pará. He came to us to study how those pieces came to be in museums. So he hit us, and he also went to U of M's Natural History Museum, because they have a lot of Marajo artifacts from there. And what's kind of ironic is we have all these artifacts here in Battle Creek. They don't have a lot of Marajoara artifacts still in Brazil because they're not as easy to find on the island, and most of the ones that were in museums in Brazil were in the National Museum in Rio de Janeiro, and that went up in fire in 2018, so right before he visited. And also, no, those pictures were not taken today, even though I'm wearing the exact same shirt. Like, oh, not today. It was.
Oh, we didn't plan that, did we?
Yeah, it was a year ago, honestly. Yeah.
Only a year ago. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So it's
But
important to
that's
show that Kingman Museum really is for all ages, like lifelong and life-wide learning. So we even have PhD students from outside the country come and look at our pieces.
what a vast collection it is, and how far it reaches out. That Brigham and people that have carried on have done such a great job bringing all this stuff here.
Yep.
I love this picture. A lot of people are surprised to know that most of our programming actually happens off-site because we only have so much space in that building. And we do get questioned a lot about when we're open and why. We're actually open technically every day. During the week, we open it up for group reservations and field trips. It's on the weekend when it's open to the public. The space just doesn't allow, in one bathroom, doesn't really allow for both of those groups to interact. We definitely take field trips very seriously, and we want to make sure that we have 100% focus on those students. And then on the weekends, being able to give it our all for the public, our visitors that come in. But this is one of the examples here, and another one as well. This one is where I'm at Grand Rapids Children's Museum. They hosted a big day of play, and so we were invited to come out. This is where we are balancing dinosaur eggs, I believe. So a lot of off-site programming. I'm in schools every week, schools and churches and early childhood facilities, you name it. We kept pretty busy.
Yeah.
So we've got about 6 or 8 more slides, and I just keep talking about the future. And you've mentioned it already. I mean, right now you're not doing these things. You want to get back to doing those things, right? Yeah.
The community wants it back too. When Emily posts stuff on Facebook, and I have people who are really interested, and of course I keep telling them, then show up, is what I keep telling people. If you really want to support these things, then show up and be there, because that's what we need, is people to be involved.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, with, like I said, the collection is in storage. It's all in boxes, and we feel really good about where it is right now and how our objects have been taken care of during the move. Here you see Corrigan moving systems. This is our saber-tooth, and I really had sleepless nights because I did not know how this was going to take place. Like, how can you secure such a fragile object? The way it's mounted, it's just all on little wires, and but here you can sort of like see the beginning of how everything was taken care of and studded, and eventually everything is filled with peanuts. So there's peanuts, and but they did a phenomenal job. So everything is safe in storage, and now really what we are here we go. It's like an empty lobby. This is where the polar bear used to be, and then the back wall was where the saber-tooth and the dire wolf were. So really what we are doing now is we are developing strategy. There goes the polar bear. We had to fight back tears when this was happening.
Not bad.
So we're developing strategy, and we really are back to the drawing table. So what is a museum? A museum has a collection. This is the old planetarium right here. We have a museum collection, and with the museum collection, we provide experiences. And how do we do that, and why are we doing that? And so we do that by providing inspiring experience, by providing free choice learning environments that what interests you as a visitor, you can learn. You can dive deeper. And we are doing this because we can provide people with a quality of life through arts and cultures. And we are embarking on huge fund development, because we not only moving our offices, we're moving the whole museum. So collection storage, but also building new exhibits and building like a whole new outreach program with Emily and Josh together and our phenomenal board members. And we really are looking forward to community input. And, how do you see the museum grow and be relevant to the community and be contemporary in its efforts?
Altina, how can people get involved and help? How can people help?
Yeah.
How can people help? It's like,
Yeah, so we are going to have listening sessions. So when we have developed directions within our strategy, we are going to reach out to the community to hear what do you think, what can we mean for you. Of course, donations would be phenomenal. Josh and Emily throw in some ideas here as well. You with your network.
A lot of it, and what I do as the outreach manager is creating those partnerships. We've even talked about what would a collaboration look like. Is it okay that we sit independently on our own, reaching for all of these resources? What if we partnered with another nonprofit or another museum or any other organization where we can share in the resources, whether it's the marketing and the administration and the board members? I think it's talking to the community and what do you want us to look like? What can you gain from a Kingman Museum and how can we help deliver that? So like Altina mentioned, a lot of talking to everybody, doing programs like this. Thank you, Willard Library, for the platform. And reaching out even outside of Battle Creek. What are other resources at the state level? And then really asking. Obviously, we want to keep the collection in a good spot. Do we also want to do that for the building? It takes the community has to let us know so we know where to put those resources.
Yeah, and they can do that. And your website is still active, kingmanmuseum.org, and they can ask a question and get information. Annie has a question for the program. The exhibit. Well, you can read it, right?
Sure, yeah. So Jonathan Kirkwood liked our Watson exhibit. So our Watson, I mentioned super briefly. It's the one thing Brigham Senior did publish on, and the Watson is a bird of prey that lives in the Amazon rainforest. It's sometimes known as the stink bird because it ferments things in its stomach to digest better, so it has a fermented smell to it when it's alive. And the Watson baby Watsons have little hooks on the tips of their wings, and that lets them climb up trees more easily. So at the early science time period, when Brigham Senior was studying these, it was sometimes nicknamed the four-legged bird, and there were some theories that this was some sort of missing link between dinosaurs and birds, which isn't really the case, but it does have a very interesting wing shape, and so that's what Brigham Senior published his articles on, and we have one super nice Watson mount that we have there, and a few that Brigham Senior did bring back from Marajó, from Brazil in around 1881, and we still have those at the museum.
Does it smell?
No.
Okay.
Well, it's a little old.
Not the same smell, but no. Those smells came from the inside, so there wouldn't be anything on the feathers.
But we're definitely still enthusiastic. We're definitely all still here. And if you want to stay involved, I'd say like the best way to do that is to follow our Facebook page. You can actually get our newsletter emailed right to you. We don't send a lot out, but any updates that we do, you can just text the word Kingman, 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 to 22828. 22828. You can actually check that out on the Facebook page. It's right there too. And so we're trying to be as transparent as possible, right? To let everybody know what we're doing and when.
Well, it's nice.
We are all ears.
People want to know, Emily. I mean, lots of people have asked me, and so having this helps because I can tell people where to go look because people are interested, and they may not be able to do a lot, but just being interested is good. That's what you want people to see.
And we can still do rotating exhibits. I would definitely keep an eye out on the Art Center of Battle Creek. They have opened their space up for us to be able to display collections there as well. So definitely keep an eye out on them too.
Does somebody here have an inn?
We know someone there. They've been a phenomenal partner of ours over the years.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, kudos to them.
Well, it's been a lot of fun. your enthusiasm is contagious. Let's hope, because a lot of people do have fond memories and are curious about the future. Eltina, you have a great staff and a great team, and
yeah, they're phenomenal, and I have to also my board members, because they're doing a phenomenal job in these difficult times. Sometimes, even though we're still enthusiastic, it's sometimes hard to.
oh, sure, absolutely.
Well, thank you guys for being out there. Thank you for still being there for us.
Well, I think
The community appreciates it. They do.
Yeah. Well, thank you, and thank you all for being on this program, and everybody who's chiming in. Thank you so much for your comments and support to the museum. Thank you.
All right, and if any viewers came in halfway and want to see the whole thing, it's on YouTube. You just go to Willard Library's channel, you'll find it there. You can find it on Facebook. You'll work harder at it. I'm going to add Randy back in here just so he can say goodbye. So we have two Indiana Joneses, and actually someone from Access Vision through Josh said, hey, we'd like to air this, so we're going to look into that too. So we want to get the word out, and this is always a lot of fun planning, and it's always a lot of fun having the show. So thank you.
You guys do a great job at Willard. Thank you for supporting
Yes,
it.
absolutely.
This is great. Thank you for hosting it.
All right, and next month, I think, if all things go well, we're going to look at the Shepherd House on Riverside and take a look at that. And so watch us on Facebook. We'll let you know.
Okay.
Until then, survive the last blast of winter tonight and tomorrow. Let's hope it's the last. And
let's hope.
Let's hope. All right. Good night, everybody.
Good
Take
night.
care.
Thank you.
Bye.